Hi everyone, thanks for having us today. It's our privilege to be able to talk about professional peer supervision today. So really about establishing that vital support and development initiative for peer workers. The main sort of target that we have to talk about today is for people to leave with an understanding about what authentic peer supervision is and how we can navigate that and what to expect in that process. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land in which we're meeting today, in which we all work and live, including people that are joining us online. I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge people with lived experience, us all here today, the people that we work with and we work alongside and our colleagues, and really acknowledge the work that is going on in here. And I think it's it fills me with a lot of pride to see everyone and all the passion that we all have in this space. So I'd like to introduce myself. So my name is Chris Grimley. I am the Specialist Peer Worker at Flourish Australia. My role there is to design, oversee and implement different peer work programs and initiatives across the organisation, such as peer work training, professional supervision, communities of practice, support for management in peer education and understanding to best support the peer work staff and nurture those conversations. I'm also one of the 10 accredited peer supervisors, accredited under a being, to provide professional supervision to people within New South Wales. And I've currently completed about maybe over 150 hours of professional supervision with people in and out of Flourish Australia. So that's where I'm coming from in this space.
Sorry, I'm short. And I'm Athena. I work at Wellways Australia as the practice leading peer support. Very similar role to what Chris is doing with Flourish. And it is a relatively new role at Wellways and something that I actually advocated for a peer leadership pathway. So find me during the breaks and I can let you know what that looked like.
And we both come with an extensive range of experience throughout the industry in various different roles and programs. Myself with about 10 years and Athena with 28, I believe. Yeah, across various parts of the industry.
Yeah, 28 in community services, about 10 in the lived experience perspective, peer workspace.
Yeah, awesome. Woo, right, I know. Okay, so I'd like to invite everyone just to, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes. So I'd like everyone to put their hand up if at the moment they are participating in professional peer supervision. Wonderful. Okay. I'd like everyone to put their hand up if they are... So I'd like to keep your hands up, please. Sorry, apologies. So I'd like you to keep your hand up if you are doing so but not with a direct line manager. So someone that you report to within the service that you work, even if they are a senior peer. I'd like you to keep your hand up if you are doing so with a peer worker and not with a clinician or someone outside of a peer work role. Cool. All right, perfect. So the benefits of peer supervision. So as I said, I want everyone to walk away today with an understanding about what peer supervision is. So it's about the ongoing critical reflective practice of peer work practice, knowledge and skills, an opportunity to really dive into that space specifically about our peer work practice. It's about accountability and the exploration of peer-specific values. So really being able to sort of dive into that space of what values specifically make up us as a profession. It's about professional and personal development, which also references the fact that we are bringing ourselves as individuals into our role as peer workers. Part of our professional practice, most of our professional practice, is about who we are as people and what our lived experience brings into our practice. So it's an opportunity to kind of see the relationships between those two. It's about equitable access to peer work specific development. So not everyone is working in large teams of peer workers, has access to senior peer roles for any kinds of mentorship, are in different kinds of organisations with different understandings of peer work practice. So it's a way to kind of promote consistency across the board. It's about nurturing and building peer worker expertise, confidence and the capacity to reinforce that future enhancement of the workforce. So once again, through that consistency, through that way of making sure that everyone has their best understanding of what we can do as a workforce. We're only as good as our foundations and, our equal consistent understanding. And that can really help individuals shine through and, future leaders be built and things like that. And lastly, it's an opportunity for to have peer work practices, values, and relationships actually role modelled in real time. With peer supervision, you're working as a peer worker through that process as well. So the things that you're talking about in these sessions are actually being role modelled and shown in real time. So the differences to other kinds of reflective practice and supervision models. So peer supervision doesn't delve into the realms of things like performance management, about productivity, so KPIs, all those sorts of things. About assessment, which might be present in other kinds of supervision, like clinical supervision, where there's an aspect of, seeing if someone's, going along with the different things that are expected in the role. There is an accountability aspect, of course, but it's not that definitive assessment that comes along with it. Talking about any non-relevant aspects of your day-to-day work, specific other tasks that don't fit within that peer work realm. About peer supervisors, it's not about peer supervisors problem solving for peer workers. And it obviously doesn't perpetuate those power dynamics that may be present in other kinds of supervision. But it does focus on guidance, about widening scope and perspective, about walking people through different situations and being able to offer from a place of experience and understanding about what we are experiencing in our work and help people find their own solutions to things, or at least think about things a little bit differently. And that's in a mutual space that we're able to gain that understanding from each other. It's about pure reflection. So really having an opportunity to sit within that space and not jump to that problem-solving aspect like we might do sometimes, and sometimes is within our nature as human beings. About reframing issues and barriers. Once again, coming from that mutual and reciprocal pathway, these lateral relationships that we have, and not coming from a place of power. And lastly, an opportunity to be in a safe and vulnerable space to be able to compassionately challenge each other about different things. And that works both ways. There are conflicts of interest to consider when engaging in professional peer supervision, and a lot of these things are to do with if we find that some of these conflicts of interest are present within this supervision structures in which we're working in, then perhaps we may not be engaging in that pure professional peer supervision. And there are things to kind of navigate within that space. So that's about peer supervision not being facilitated by peer workers. Professional supervision, as a definition, is by someone in that profession to another person within that profession. So it's really important that we have peer workers providing supervision for peer workers. Peer supervisors having that inadequate experience perhaps as a peer worker, and that's just not about time in the industry. That could be about how much they've engaged actually in peer work practice in their role, and having the ability to be able to reflect on that practice and also guide someone through that experience themselves. So people providing peer supervision, not having the adequate training on actually how to facilitate that peer supervision is a big barrier that we can come up against. It's not just about having that experience in your practice, but also about how to facilitate those conversations, hold that space. People having dual relationships or previous other kinds of relationships with peer workers, either they have been their direct line manager in the past, they have a personal relationship. These are things that can create biases and things like that in the conversations. So we need to be really aware. An example, I provide peer supervision to the team coordinator peer specialists at Flourish Australia. I have one of the workers that work with us. I used to be their direct team coordinator, so we were able to move and organise things that I didn't provide supervision for that person because there was a pre-existing relationship in that. So about navigating through those processes. And also peer workers not engaging in their own peer supervision, because it's an opportunity to keep us accountable to the way that we work as peer supervisors. So there are some barriers to providing meaningful and appropriate peer supervision, and this comes from actually people having access to it, as well as being able to see values of it. So this is about productivity demands within services. We see this in all different ways amongst the industry. I know definitely in the CMO sector, things like the NDIS putting really, really high levels of productivity restraints on people. The people don't have time are viewed to not have time to step out into that because it's seen as less important than getting those dollars back into the services. And other times, at times not adequately allocated. Decision makers not really understanding or seeing the worth of peer supervision, or other kinds of peer work professional development, as has been like a large part of this discussion in the last 2 days. Peer work not being widely recognised as a practice that actually needs to have supervision. You know, other kinds of practice in the industry do have an opportunity to be reflected upon, unlike other professions that require that professional supervision. Individual LHDs, organisations and services having those different perspectives on what peer work practice is, what peer work is, what are, like, you know, the different things, what's the value, all those other things. The ability to fund peer supervision is obviously a huge one. That's probably one of the #1 obstacles. And lastly, the access to appropriate training and accreditation for suitable individuals to become peer supervisors. Keeping it authentic and valued. So when we're building, at Flourish Australia, we do have an internal supervision model. That did take a lot of time to work out the way that we could, you know, work with all those different kinds of conflicts of interest to make sure that we were providing authentic and meaningful peer supervision. We have the context of having a large geographical spread, so peer supervisors providing supervision to peer workers make sure that they're not within the same region of work as the peer worker is. So there's that no way of crossing over into line management. Documentation's all kept separately. The details of like the supervisions are kept private. All those sorts of things are put in place to make sure that it remains authentic and meaningful. And obviously this comes at a risk of not having peer supervision, and not doing it in an appropriate way also comes down to perhaps compromising best practice in there and the risks that can come along with that. About being able to challenge with respect and compassion to people that perhaps are, how do I say this? The people that are, you know, are sort of not fans of the notion of peer supervision and encouraging that. So being able to like meet that with the information that we have and being able to advocate for that appropriately. And lastly, about access versus value and investment. We know people that feel supported and, you know, have development opportunities in the workplace. You know, people like retaining in their jobs is higher, burnout is decreased. All of these things that actually really affect productivity, and all these things that are usually the deterrent for people participating in it, actually end up working better. So there's an investment that needs to be put into place for people to actually engage for the future of it. I'd like to invite Athena to give some reflections about herself as a someone receiving peer supervision.
Thank you, Chris. So I first met Chris at FEMS last year, and he did a presentation on peer supervision and introduced the Flourish framework on peer supervision. So I really started to reflect on what was I getting within my workplace. So I've got an amazing line manager, I've got a great team around me, but what I felt really was that identification of being in a peer leadership role and who could provide that peer supervision for me, which is why I then contacted Chris, and we had a bit of a chat about, you know, what that looked like for me externally, having that access to peer supervision. So we've been working together now in that peer supervision space for 6 months at least, yeah. And what I've been able to identify within myself is that professional development was a huge thing for me. Being able to, you know, talk with Chris and co-reflect with Chris and really identify, you know, what some of my gaps might be in my professional development. And in particular, to not feel so isolated in the role that I was doing at Wellways, and being able to talk through that and be able to really go quite deep into peer work practice. We both are trained in IPS, someone mentioned intentional peer support before, so we utilise those values within our co-reflection and peer supervision. And in particular, being able to talk with someone and co-reflect with someone who does come from the CMO perspective as well, who definitely has, you know, some experiences, some similar experiences that we could talk through, and to not feel so alone and so stressed, to really identify for me that being able to get external peer supervision, I was able to keep that separate from my paid role as well, and being able to go deeper in those conversations without having that conflict of what do I talk about, who do I talk to about that too. So that's where Chris stepped in. It was negotiated with my line manager because it does take a little bit of budgeting to be able to access that. But again, it's about self-advocacy. I identified what I needed, and I identified who was able to provide that for me within the context of the role that I'm doing now. And that was negotiated and agreed to. And obviously it will be reviewed at some stage. There will be at some point where I will need to show some outcomes of accessing that peer supervision with Chris. But yeah, I highly recommend Chris. So just another little sort of nudge there. If you are looking at external peer supervision, Chris and I know Beate is another one of the accredited peer supervision people from Being. So yeah, have a look into it and see how you go. At least give it a go, yeah?
Thanks heaps for that. We've got a couple of the accredited peer supervisors that undertook the course with us in the room as well, so I just really wanted to acknowledge them as well. It was an awesome time. Just lastly, just got the one little bit. So hopes for the future, yeah? At the moment, it's a bit of a space where we sort of don't really know what it's going to look like moving forward. Our hopes today were to be able to provide the appropriate information about, how can we hold those conversations? What should be the expectations when we are looking to engage in professional peer supervision? We're very happy to answer any questions after. I'm sure there are some other people here that are currently doing things in that space at the moment that'd be happy to talk about it as well. Just a couple of references just for note for today that's, sort of helped inspire all of this. And once again, thank you so much.